hear you. So, all right. So, good afternoon. Welcome. This is our panel discussion, saying their names, Berkshire County's Black Patriots, the legacy of Samuel Harrison, and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. All right, so my name is Emerita Whitehead. I'm the administrator of the Sheffield Historical Society. Firstly, we want to thank the First Congregational Church, Pastor Joe Graham, for allowing us to use their beautiful and historically significant space for this event. We also want to thank the Samuel Harrison Society, Francis, Blayne, and the rest of the board and volunteers for partnering with us for this program and hopefully many more to come. We want to thank Housatonic Heritage for co-sponsoring and their continuous work on this subject and many other endeavors that preserve often underrepresented history. On behalf of the Sheffield Historical Society, I want to thank Paul O'Brien there in the back, the researchers at the Mark Dewey Research Center, our wonderful board of trustees and volunteers, and finally, I'd like to thank our amazing panel for being with us today, some traveling from Pittsfield, Blandford, and even Philadelphia. So thank you all for being here with us today. Today, Tuesday, November 11th, 2025, is Veterans Day. We want to acknowledge the brave men and women who have served our country, many of whom are here today and on our panel. Thank you for your service to our great country. And a couple of reminders. Following discussion, we will have some light refreshments, and we have some exhibit panels up with more information, some really, really amazing artifacts from the Harrison Society and from the family. And again, because we're offering this on Zoom, I just want to remind folks to make sure that we have microphones. If you have questions, we'll be going around and passing those around. I will now leave it to our esteemed panelists to start the program. Thank you all for coming and supporting these stories. Live. There you go.
Good afternoon and welcome. We're just very, very happy to be here today on November the 11th, Veterans Day, to talk about. I have a mic. Nobody can hear that from the mic? Hello? Thank you. My name is Francis Jones-Sneed, and I will be moderating the panel this afternoon on Berkshire County's Black Patriots and the legacy of Reverend Samuel Harrison and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. I'd like to introduce from my right on our panelists and guests today. This is Blayne Whitfield. Blayne is the Vice President of the Samuel Harrison Society and the great-great-grandson of the Reverend Samuel Harrison. Next to Blayne is my sister from another mother, Jocelyn Jones Arnold. And Jocelyn also has ancestors from the Revolutionary War all the way through the Civil War. And her story is going to be a very, very interesting one. Sitting next to her is from the Massachusetts 54th Reenactment Group is Mr. Joe Zellner, who will talk about their activities there. And last but not least, at the end of the group is Colonel Patricia K. Wright, whose ancestors also were in the 54th, and she'll talk a little bit about them, but she'll also talk about her own activities as a person and as a veteran, following up on her ancestors' kind of lines. So from the Civil War through whichever war she participated in. Isn't that great? Welcome them. So as we mark 160 years since the end of the Civil War, we honor the courage and sacrifice of Berkshire County's Black patriots from the Revolutionary era through the Civil War, and reflect on the enduring legacy of the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry and its bravery and legacy that it leaves to us as Berkshire County residents today. What we're going to do is that we're going to ask questions of the panelists one at a time, and then at the very end, we'll ask them a final question. I ask that the panelists keep their responses, talking to Jocelyn now, keep their responses to 2 minutes or less. We will be coming back around to you to round up if we could. So we're going to begin with Mr. Zellner, who is the historian with the Massachusetts 54th Reenactment Group. What first drew you, Mr. Zellner, to the 54th Reenactment Group?
There are many facets to respond to in that question, but I think most directly, I was intrigued and interested when I saw the film Glory. Subsequently, as that interest waned or diminished, I won't say, I guess that's a synonym, but nonetheless, I saw the centennial commemorative installation of the Shaw 54th Monument in Boston being celebrated in 1997. And at that particular place, I saw reenactors, and I thought I'd like to do that. My eyes were open for the first time to see people who were reenacting the lives and the life of soldiers who weren't in a film. It took me 2 more years after that event, though, to finally become active and seek out a reenacting group. In fact, they sought me out. I had portrayed another Black patriot in Concord, Massachusetts. I was interviewed by John Element, a reporter for the newspaper. And from that interview being published in the newspaper, I got 3 invitations to join a reenacting group. They came to me. One of them was the 54th Massachusetts. The 2 others, one was from Vermont and one was from New Hampshire. And I thought, I don't need to go to Vermont or New Hampshire. I can go right to Boston. And I did, and I took on the role of becoming a recruit to a private and then wanting to reenact a real person from the regiment, not just a generic soldier. And the character that I found was a man from Munson, Massachusetts, by the name of, it escapes me. The character, it's in your flyer. And he will be one of the members of his family. Himself, his 2 sons, and a nephew will join and serve in the regiment. So that was a long response to what might have been a short answer, but I think the response is necessary to show and support the notion that there are many facets as to what I was attracted to and drawn into, and have served since the year 2000.
Thank you, Mr. Zellner. Jocelyn Jones, when did you first encounter the name Jethro Jones in your family story? And what made that history feel? What did it feel like when you first found that name?
So I first learned of Jethro Jones in 2020 during COVID. I was sick of watching the numbers go up and all the craziness in the world, and decided to go back to my ancestry.com account. And it popped up. And I thought that can't be my Jones. With a name like Jones, you know, you don't really think that running into another Jones is someone who's you're related to. Came to find through records, through his military records and through census records and things, that he is in fact my 4 times great-grandfather. So great-great-great-great-grandfather. And through his son Hakaliah, who was born after his time in the Revolutionary War, that's where my connection to Sheffield actually sort of comes from, because his son Hakaliah moved here in the 1810s, I believe. I will say that Jethro was enlisted in the Revolutionary War at the age of 45. He wintered at Valley Forge, where he was actually in sick bay twice. He was present at the Battle of Saratoga for the capturing of General Burgoyne, which was the turn of the tide during the Revolutionary War. And he was also present at the Battle of Monmouth, where his regiment, the 15th Massachusetts Regiment, led by Colonel Timothy Bigelow out of Worcester, was the very last regiment on the field when George Washington and his troops came to relieve the fighting. And his history, or his service to the country, has continued through generations of Joneses. Some are represented in the 54th. There's actually 5 of his direct descendants that were part of the 54th out of Berkshire County alone. And that goes up to my father, Chester Jones, who was in the Korean War. That ended, but my parents moved to Philadelphia and sent my brother and I to Quaker school. So we did not go into the military. But it means a lot to me knowing this, because I had no idea that I could even trace my lineage back before the Civil War. To be able to find a direct descendant who actually, I still carry his name, who was free in the 1700s, which is crazy, but who also fought for this country and literally put my existence and my cousins the Pipers, who are also descended from him, our existence was put on the line when he enlisted at 45, because his son Hakaliah was born after that. So it's really given me a renewed sense of what it means to be American, what it means to belong. Even though it's kind of a difficult time to celebrate being American, but the history of it is something that I feel like it's not enough is said about African Americans who fought in the Revolutionary War. So I'm honored to represent that tradition.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Was 2020 the first time that you knew before 2020 that Jethro Jones served in the Revolutionary War?
No, I knew nothing about him, nothing at all.
Before 2020?
Yes, exactly. And
Okay.
and I am now part of the Daughters of the American Revolution, Independence Hall chapter. And when I applied, Jethro wasn't even in their database. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Jocelyn. I asked that question because I'm now coming to Blayne Whitfield, and I'm asking Blayne, when did you first learn that Reverend Samuel Harrison was your ancestor and that he served in the Civil War?
Well, I have to say that I've always known. I must learn at a very early age, probably even before I went to school, I'm guessing. And I was told 3 facts about Samuel Harrison at the time: that he was chaplain of the 54th Regiment. He was my great-great-grandfather. He had built the house that my family lived in, and he was pastor of the Second Congregational Church in Pittsfield, which we often visited when we were up here, because I'm from Connecticut. We were up here during the summertime. So I'm thinking that, I knew about him before I even knew what Black history was. Before any of that, I knew about him before I probably could read and write. So I was told at a very early age.
Thank you. So now I'll skip over to Patricia and ask you a similar question. Who is your ancestor and when did you learn about them?
Well, I guess I learned about them when in the early 2000s, I contacted the Sheffield Historical Society. I was in charge of a Black History Month commemorative celebration. I think it was our 200th anniversary, and they were trying to find soldiers and service people that had prior history or had come from families that had served along the way. And it was Jim Miller who got me in touch, and him and Paul got me my two uncles, Nathan and Nathaniel Johnson, served in the Civil War. And so after that, we just kept going. We just kept trying to find out more and more and more information. And it turns out there was a Crosler, a cousin, that was also in the regiment. So we've had a long history of service to the nation, and my family included. And we're proud of that service.
So you found three relatives who were ancestors who served in the 54th?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Mr. Zellner, coming back to you, what kind of programs do you guys put on? I mean, how do you come up with what you're going to prepare and do when you do a presentation?
Thank you. As reenactors, most commonly we are called on to reenact battles from the war. But apart from that, we also do programs for school students, K through college. We do programs for civic groups. We do programs for military groups. We do programs for civilian church groups, any group that wants to call upon us to tell our story. And the story we tell quite often depends on the reenactors that are available to tell it. And each reenactor will tell his story. I try to tell the story of Solomon Pierce. I knew it'd come to me. I try to tell the story of Solomon Pierce, and I'm in favor of trying to get all of our reenactors to reenact a real veteran from the war, not just put on the uniform and run around and look pretty, or at least look different, but to learn the story of a reenactor from the program. We have done many programs in Western Massachusetts because we know that there are many enlistees, many volunteers who came from Western Massachusetts. One of the things that I think maybe it's not mine to be proud of, but I'm proud that Solomon Pierce made the decision, because he made his decision to join and volunteer at 42 years of age. Now, he wasn't the oldest man in the regiment, but he was the first man that I found who approximated my age in Company A. There are other 44-year-olds I've found, 45-year-olds, but when I found Solomon Pierce, it impressed upon me I could portray a 42-year-old, even though I wasn't 42. Solomon stayed 42. I'm much older than 42 now. But nonetheless, his story as an individual was quite intriguing. And in researching his history to share with others, you have to decide, what are you going to tell about this person? There are a lot of unanswered questions that documents that I've been able to find have generated. I can't answer them for myself, and I know I can't answer them for an audience member who might ask me, what did he do before the war? But I can certainly tell you what the census record says, what his Army record says, and then what other members in his family did. So when we present programs, we use the personnel that we have available, and we tell a history of the regiment. We tell and try to get people to realize and distinguish film from fact, because Glory has been well received, and I certainly appreciate its production and the reception it has received. But there are interpretations that go along with what we know to be a more accurate history than gets portrayed on the screen. So, depending on who we have and the interest of the group that hires or requests our presence, we meld our story. I was going to say bin, that doesn't sound too good, but we meld our story to fit the audience that we are speaking to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zellner. And I must say that your reenactors have been in Berkshire County numerous times, and we're very thankful to you guys who come when we ask you to programs like the programs today. So thank you very much. Jocelyn, as your research, when you found your ancestor, you started a full-scale research project.
Say that.
Kind of delving into it. And in fact, you found so many ancestors that, they just kind of people you all the time, they kind of talk to you, right? So what continuities did you find from the Revolutionary War through the Civil War? Continuity like faith or local networks, ideas, citizenships. What did you find that, really braided those men together and their families?
Well, I think one definitely is the military service, because it has transferred through, but also it's really just the continuity of the community. I feel like I'm here as representing the Jones family, but I also represent the Piper family, the Williams family. I'm just one person that is connected to all these people, but I'm not an anomaly. I'm sure if Patricia wasn't off trying to save the world basically, and me being here in front of my computer, I had the time to be able to look through and make these connections. And it's really almost become, well, it's a passion. I was going to say it's a obsession. But I've found that the community, the free Black community in Berkshire County, is more connected through, it's connected through the descendants themselves. And so I know for me, it's really important to try to communicate as much about these people, just to really acknowledge their existence, but also to encourage more African Americans to look into their history, because together we represent a community that is not really spoken of. I mean, this was the earliest, I believe, free Black community in this country. And so many of these families, if not all of these families, quite honestly, are related somehow, whether it's through marriage or, just by birth. And that's really exciting. And it's something that we are uncovering right now. And there's never been a better time, I think, to highlight this history, to celebrate this history, especially going into the 250th, and also with the erasure of history that we're seeing from a federal level.
It's very interesting. I want to make a kind of connection between you and Blayne, in that you have a document in the back that connects you with Blayne's ancestry. What is that?
So the oldest document that I had when I started doing my research was my great-grandparents' marriage certificate, and they were married. Kitty Gilliard married Frank Jones in Pittsfield in 1893, and they were married by Samuel Harrison. And when I saw that, my father actually went to the archives in Washington, D.C. in the 90s and got it and gave it to me back then. And I was like, what do you want me to do with this? I didn't mean anything to me. But then later, after he passed on, and I thought maybe I should look into my family history, I found it. And I didn't know who Samuel Harrison was. And then knowing about, they got married at my uncle Samuel Jones's house, who was in the 54th with Samuel Harrison. And then I realized, is that really the same person? So I only met Blayne. Blayne and I are on the board of Samuel Harrison Society together, but I've only met him in person just now. And it was electric. I feel like it was sort of like a reunion of old souls. So it really made me happy.
Well, that flows over to you, Blayne. I know that you knew, even before you knew about Samuel Harrison, but when did you really become interested in kind of researching your family history?
As soon as I got high-speed internet, So, so I started just Googling Samuel Harrison, and his name popped up, and I was amazed. And I showed my wife, and we decided to go seek out. So what was coming up on the computer was documents and publications at the local libraries here in Berkshire County. So me and my wife hopped in a car and we drove up to Berkshire County. We went to the Berkshire Athenaeum. We went to a library in Williamstown, and I was amazed to see all these books that Samuel Harrison had written. The weird thing was that I thought I had made a shocking discovery, and I couldn't wait to tell members of my family. So I on my annual visit out to Washington State, I sat down with my mother and my aunt and told them, it's like, wow, you know what I found? And my aunt says, hold on a minute. And she comes back into the room with his copy of his autobiography. So it's something that I guess I needed to do to seek him out. You know, I had to ask the questions, and so I regret not asking those kind of questions earlier. I guess I was young and foolish like a lot of people and stuck in my ways and worrying about myself. Even though I had known about Samuel Harrison a long time, and it was, the history was all around me. I just didn't reach out and grab it. So at that moment, when it came, I did reach out and I grabbed it.
Thank you, Blayne. And Patricia, we know that, as Jocelyn said, you've been boots on the ground and, you know, giving your service to the country and keeping us safe. But have you delved into, or have your family members began to delve into your family history?
Yes, we've tried on and off and off and on to try to make all the connections, but our family is so large and the names are very repetitive and it's hard to keep track of who's who and is it the same person? Is it a junior? Is it a senior? Is it a first? Is it a second? Is it a third? Is it a fifth? So I think that has complicated our history and trying to, but I am actually retired now. And that is one of my goals, is to make all those connections and to just be a bother to the Sheffield Historical Society and just take up a corner. I'm moving in. You might want to get some TNT to get me out of there.
I think that a lot of us would like to move into the Sheffield Historical Society because they are so welcoming and so generous and so helpful to everyone who comes through that door, you know. And so, it is through that connection from the Sheffield Historical Society that's kind of brought us all together, you know, because I've met you for the first time, even though I've been working on the history of Blacks in Berkshire County now for over almost 30 years. So look at that. You know, we just kind of never know who we meet, although I know your sister well.
Who doesn't know Stephanie?
Okay, Mr. Zellner, another question to you. Do you guys talk about the equal pay protest that the 54th Regiment took on?
We do, and that becomes part of our presentation as we talk about the history of the regiment. We revel. I know when I was closer to 42, it was fun to reenact the battles. And I've had the opportunity to reenact 4 of the 5 major engagements that the regiment was a part of from 1863 to 1865. And the equal pay issue, one of those unanswered questions, I don't understand how they could continue to do their job and not receive any pay. Not that it was a lesser amount, but it was no amount. Yes, they were promised $15 a month at enlistment, but they were, I'm mistaken, $13 a month at enlistment. And then when it came time to receive their pay, they were given $10 a month. And that diminution was because they were black. Black soldiers are not as valuable as white soldiers. And in response to that, the men, and one of the issues about the film is that issue to boycott the pay was not one offered by the officers. It was one offered by the men. And then the officers joined with them. So that differentiation based on color, and then the issue of refusing to accept any pay, and then there was the offer made by the state of Massachusetts. Well, we will support you by giving you the $3 a month difference from the federal pay. The men refused even that offer by the state of Massachusetts because who was the correspondent from New Bedford? Again, that name will come to me when I'm not trying. But no, it's not Douglas. I'm not sure specifically what his role was in, but he certainly was advocating for first the recruitment and the service of black soul soldiers. I'm not sure what his role was in response to the pay issue, but the men refused to accept any pay unless they would be given the $13 a month that was promised on enlistment, in addition to having the bounties that were offered for enlistment that would be sent home. So as I think of Solomon, my character, he joins the regiment in December, and the men have already decided prior to the battle in South Carolina in July that they're not going to accept any pay. How does one gin up the interest, the nerve, the willingness to go and serve in a regiment that's not being paid? And they have chosen not to accept any pay. They will get their pay in 1864, but that will be more than a year of service without pay. And keep in mind, this was not a mutiny. This was a boycott. They continued to do their work, serve as soldiers, fight the battles, follow orders, but they refused to accept the lesser amount, and they refused to have Massachusetts make up the difference so the amount would be equalized.
That's great. And I think one of the things that we don't understand, these were just not individual single men. Most of them had families back home. Samuel Harrison had a wife and children, and they counted on his salary. And these men had families back home who counted on their salaries. And if they didn't have money to send back to their family, that meant that not only did they starve or they go without, but their families also were deprived of, sustenance because of this boycott. So a very valiant effort on their part. I started to try to make a connection between now and what's happening in our contemporary world, but people didn't volunteer to boycott without pay this time. Their pay is just being withheld. But anyway, going back to Jocelyn again. Jocelyn, what would you like to say to the audience about your research that just really kind of surprised you, other than finding the connections and the names? You're kind of like me, as a lot of researchers are. We find these little tiny things and we start to scream and shout, and people think that we are absolutely crazy, right? So what did you find that really impressed you? What was the first one that you found? Can you remember?
I mean, I think really the thing that was just the most impressive was finding, Black people listed in the census before the Civil War, just their existence, quite honestly. I've gone on, I mean, I guess I've been doing this for about 5 years now. And it really is my belief that every African American does have freedom in their lineage, in their tree somewhere. But it really growing up, unlike Blayne, who grew up knowing about this connection, I didn't have a connection, or I didn't think I did. I didn't think that there was any history to find before the Civil War. I think I'm 55, and I feel like, people in my generation, African Americans in my generation, tend to think, our ancestors were all enslaved. So, it's really a painful idea to even look into your history. And I think that's probably why, for me, I wasn't interested when my father first gave me that first document. And also when I got married, I think I was 34 when I got married, and I was like, I'll throw this Jones name away. Sure, let me be Arnold, because it wasn't anything that I felt connected to. But now finding this history and understanding how deep it goes and what it means and what it's meant for this country, I was like, oh, I'm going to be Jones all day long now. Like I have to represent this history. It's also kind of funny too, because as you know, my last name's Arnold, and my great-great-grandfather Jethro fought at Saratoga under Benedict Arnold. So I feel like somewhere he was saying to me when I went to get married and made the decision, like, do not take Arnold completely. At least hold on to your Jones. So I'm glad that I did, but really, I think just the existence of Black Americans in the North, and knowing how many of them there are, and just for me, just thinking like, what must it have been like to live, in a country where so many people that don't look like you south of the border don't have the freedoms that you have. And I honestly sort of believe that, as African Americans, we're as free as they were back then, which is really not that free, because we still get, judged by our skin tone and all that. I mean, this is the last thing I'll say, but during the Revolutionary War, Jethro was paid equal to others. But that's also because George Washington originally didn't want African Americans fighting in the war. Little did he know there were people that already had been in the wars. Jethro was in the French Indian Wars before that. But it wasn't a consideration until the Civil War, when specifically they said, we're not going to give you, what other white soldiers are getting. And that really, I want that to resonate with people, because I feel like the impact of that impacts the society and the culture we're in right now. I feel it. I mean, not only has it been sort of passed down in my DNA as trauma, which we know is something that happens, but you feel it. You feel that sense of being second class. And honestly, it wasn't until discovering Jethro, thanks to Sheffield, that I actually felt like, oh my gosh, I actually do belong here. So
I think that's great, Jocelyn, because I think one of the greatest points, I know that we all look at Henry Louis Gates, his broadcast on PBS, and he has very famous people that he goes through and finds the DNA, but that ordinary African Americans can find their ancestors if they are willing to work with others to kind of do that. Your story, I think, is just a great example of that, and that more African Americans should be trying to do that, because it connects us more in great kind of ways to not only that kind of trauma that we feel, but that we can feel that indeed we are part of this country. Yes. Because we make those kind of connections.
Yes.
So
I just wanted to say, just the trauma of Blackness in America is something that I have been thinking about a lot as I try to share this history and connect with others. It's something I feel like that reverberates. You don't have to be Black. I mean, I think anybody understands the pain of this. And I also just want to say, I can't thank the Sheffield Historical Society enough for even undertaking a project to uncover their Black community, because that for me truly, I mean, learning about this during COVID and all of that, it really restored my faith in humanity, that they really wanted to understand who the Black members of their community were, because they were members of their community. So thank you.
Thank you. Blayne, what did you wish that every Berkshire County person knew about Samuel Harrison's legacy?
Well, that's a great question. Because I don't think there's just one thing. But the first thing I would start with is that Samuel Harrison was born into slavery. He was born as a slave, but he was emancipated at the age of 3. And his mother was offered the opportunity to either move to New York and work for the people who formerly owned them, or to accept passage to Africa. His mother chose to go to New York, and so his life began there. And the one thing he wanted to do was, as soon as he realized that he wanted to be a minister, he sought out an education, because education wasn't easy. This was the 1830s. For African Americans, Blacks in the North, wasn't easy. He tried to go to different places and was turned away. He went to a place in Petersboro, New York, and because a wealthy man there was educating Blacks there, they forced him to close the school. But fortunately for him and a couple other students, the man sent him to Ohio, in the Western Reserve area, where he was then educated. So seeking out his education to become a minister was his primary goal. And then he came back to the greater New York area, and he worked on his craft, attended a debate society to do public speaking, and he really worked hard at that. And so, but the last thing I think would be that Samuel Harrison, even though he was a prominent figure, he still wasn't equal. And so he spent the rest of his life trying to speak to people who would listen, through his published sermons, who attended churches in the area, people he probably came up to on the street, just to let them know that, things aren't right in this country. Black man is still not equal with his white counterparts. And so he spent the rest of his life doing that, because his own children never were able to even reach the part of his life that he was able to reach. His own children, other than beyond high school, couldn't do much. And even his grandchildren could not necessarily find jobs here in Berkshire County. My grandmother, who was educated as a nurse, was turned away from hospitals in Pittsfield in the 1920s. She was forced to travel to New York City to work at the Henry Street settlement. Her brothers couldn't even be educated in the North. They had to travel south to attend an HBCU. And then I think with the idea that they probably couldn't even get jobs here, they stayed south and taught at other HBCUs. Only a few of the family members remained in the North, but they still, the family could not really achieve much equality until the next generation. So Samuel Harrison tried very hard to educate people on the inequalities that Blacks were suffering from. And so those are the kind of things that I would want everybody to know about Samuel Harrison, that he strived every day of his life to try to get on equal footing, to let everybody know that God created everybody equally, and that And he believed in the Declaration of Independence. Those words that all men are created equal, and that's what he lived for.
Thank you, Blayne. Patricia, how does your service shape how you hear your descendants, ancestors' account?
Well, my ancestors have always been here. So we had a tight community. So growing up here, I knew about lots of my ancestors had been in the military service, just because when we visited their homes, you would see the pictures of our family members in uniform. So they were always very proud of that. They were always on mantles and on walls. So I knew that we had service members throughout my history. I think this has been I grew up in a very tight knit sort of, I want to say almost sheltered existence, because everything we always did, we did on Bears Den Road or Berkshire School Road, and we did at that schoolhouse. And so for me, service to my community came easy. It was the community I grew up with. It was the community that supported me throughout my career and still supports me to this day. And we try to reach out. I know my family members reach out a lot. We have tentacles everywhere. Like I said, who doesn't know Stephanie? So, so I think for me, it was really quite easy, because I think everybody kind of knew I was in the service. And I've come back and I've done a couple of things through this historical society. So for me, it's easy. It's easy because this is my community and it's where I grew up and it's where the people who love me and support me are.
Okay, thank you. What is the recruitment like, Mr. Zellner, for younger members for the 54th Reenactment Group?
Difficult. Yes, that's a very pressing and sore issue in trying to involve the next generation in this particular hobby, if you want to call it as such. Trying to get younger reenactors has been a challenge. We've had the best success in recruiting into reenacting 8 or 4-year veteran servers, people who have spent 4 or 8 years in the military, come out, still feel quite young. And I can remember that feeling of being in your 30s, but still active, still wanting to put your military training to use and to having an affection even for reenacting as a Black Civil War soldier. But for us to try to recruit and have a pipeline, a steady group, it's been quite difficult. As a high school teacher, I tried to establish a reenacting group of students in the high school where I taught, and it was a novel interest. People dropped in, hey, that's pretty neat. And pretty soon, been there, done that. No, I don't want to do it again. And it became very difficult to create a self-sustaining supply of young men who will take our place. And as reenactors now, I can't say I'm one of the younger ones, but I would imagine our group probably median age is over 60. And we laugh at each other and say, as reenactors, we're too old, we're too tall, and we're too fat to be reenacting, 1863 Civil War soldiers. So we struggle with that. We struggle with that. And some of us feel we can't leave until we get a replacement for ourselves who is at least 40. If we can get someone younger than that, all the better. But it is a challenge. But we carry on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last question of each one of you. And it could just be one word, Jocelyn. If the soldiers of the 54th, Reverend Harrison, could address us in 2025, what principle would they insist we carry forward?
I'm, one word, I'm trying to think one word, I don't know. I would say shared humanity, quite honestly. I mean, Blayne touched on that, you know, it's really, sorry, but it's really difficult when I think about, so my great-great-grandmother was Catherine Fields, and she was one of the founders of Second Congregational Church, where Samuel Harrison was the first pastor. The reason why they even formed that church is because of the racism they were experiencing at the First Congregational Church of Pittsfield. And learning about that, which again is something I learned in the last 5 years, it really it just doesn't sit well with me. And I feel like, I don't know, something about religion always, or organized religion sometimes didn't sit well with me, because I'm thinking if they are blacks and whites and whoever are all going to the same church, you are praying to and, you know, sort of, you know, have faith in the same entity, and yet you feel that someone is less deserving of you in this lifetime. Like, do you think in the afterlife, when you meet your creator, that they're going to look at you differently too? I really have a problem with that. And I guess that's what's been passed down to me, I guess. So I think it's shared humanity. You know, we all have a right to exist on this planet, in this world. We have a right to freedom, happiness. I think it's part of the Sheffield Resolves. And I know I have a copy of it at home, but it just like so beautifully states it. But, you know, we know who they're referring to, but in the words, if you read just what the words say, it's like we all deserve to be happy and feel like we belong in this country. And that's, yeah, anyway, that's 1,000 words, I think, but I apologize.
Shared
humanity.
Shared humanity.
That there's a hyphen there. So.
Okay, all right. Blayne?
Well, I can give one word. I just want to explain it. So the word I would give is love. Samuel Harrison was a pastor, a minister, a man of faith above everything else. So what he would want everybody to do is just love your fellow man. And if you do that, everything else will fall into place.
Patricia?
I'm going to say courage, because they loved when they weren't loved, and they fought when no one would fight for them. And I applaud that courage.
Thank you. Mrs. Zellner.
If I don't say it in the microphone, the Zoom audience can't hear me.
Right.
And it can't be responded to in one word. But in any case, as I think about Solomon Pierce, and as I represent him, I ask the question, what were they, the Black Civil War soldiers, and it probably applies to all soldiers, what were they fighting for? What were Black soldiers fighting for? And when you answer that, there's your one word.
Thank you, panelists. So now it's time for questions and questions from the audience. Jeannie? Wait for the microphone, Jean.
Thank you. And great job, everyone. My question is, as I'm sitting here watching, I feel like we're at the cookout. And you know how you go cookout and you see your long lost cousins and your long lost friends, and you see generations, you see, you know, old grandmama over there, you see auntie, you see uncle. And that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, because you all don't know each other, but you share that common bond. I feel it for you. So my question to each of you, do you feel some sort of kinship or connection amongst the panel? Yes, no, maybe so, yes?
I'm glad to meet these people. Yes, this is the first time I've met any of my co-panelists, and it is exciting to meet descendants of and other family members, Colonel, in our military. So, yes, there is that, Labor Day picnic aspect to this.
I just want to say yes, because I know that you're in my tree and I know that our families go way back and you're probably in my tree too. But now Joe just mentioned that he's from Philadelphia and he just whispered to me the name of my high school. I'm like, how did you know that? So there is definitely, there's a kinship here, it's visible and it's invisible too.
I would say yes too, because we're all connected. We're connected through the 54th. We're all connected through our shared history.
Yes.
Hi, I really, really appreciate this presentation. Thank you guys all for taking the effort and time and energy to come and talk to us. And I just felt what Jocelyn was saying about religion. I feel also about Veterans Day. So in terms of my shared humanity with you, when my family came from abroad to stay in a town just a little, a couple towns away from here, the Yankee family that had the house that they ended up buying had difficult relations with their neighbors. And so they said, we're going to sell the house to a Black family or an Arab family in retribution. And then when my family would go to Yankee games, they'd see the blue and white boxes and the people would be shouting on the platform, give $1, kill an Arab, give $1, kill an Arab. And so my question is really to Patricia, how do you feel about, and maybe this is too big a question to answer, but it's a complicated thing. I mean, my relatives are not considered humans, and even those who are American citizens and being killed right now in Lebanon and Palestine, they're not considered human. So our government doesn't stand up for them and doesn't fight for their existence or say that they don't deserve to be in jail or don't deserve to be killed. So how do you feel about that relationship as an oppressed person? I mean, one time recently, I ran away from my church because I feel like they're talking about all these places, the Galilee and everything in church. And I went to a church in Springfield. That's a very old church. It's St. John's. It's an African-American church. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go to where people understand oppression. And they did the same thing. They talked about all those places and everything and didn't mention the human beings being killed there. No. So I just wanted to ask you.
I stayed with my service. I did have a small break in service, but I stayed with my service because I thought everybody had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness the way that they wanted it, the way that they saw it. And I fought every day for that. And I stuck to my service for that. I thought the places that I'd been and I saw the sacrifice of people and I felt the humanity of people. And I tried to always, in all my service, to honor that and to honor the people, even the people we were there to fight. I tried to find some goodness and I tried to make everybody that was with me see that we were fighting exactly for them, not against them. And it's always better to try to see the light because the dark will drag you down. And don't let it drag you down. Stay on that hill. Keep going up that hill, even if they knock you down, you keep going up that hill. And I pushed And I pulled and I crawled up those hills many days. And some days I didn't want to get up, but I saw that it was important to do it. It was important to do it, not just for myself, but for the ones that we were leaving behind.
Another question? No?
I know you project well.
Thanks. I just had a question. I'm lost in my facts here. Samuel Harrison's relationship, if he had one, with Lincoln and with Frederick Douglass. And I'd like to add something else. You mentioned the Piper family, and I'm curious if they are also related to Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois or not. Oh. Right.
So the answer is yes, Randy.
So Samuel Harrison's connection to Lincoln centers around the equal pay issue. So early in 1864, Samuel Harrison, he actually became ill while he was in the South with the regiment. And he got to a point where he decided that for health reasons, he needed to resign. Upon giving his resignation to the governor, they had a conversation about the equal pay issue. And the governor, John A. Andrew of Massachusetts, decided to write President Lincoln on the issue. So John A. Andrew drafted a letter, had it sent to Lincoln. Lincoln then contacted Edward Bates, I believe, from his administration, and who was his Secretary General or Attorney General. And so they bantered about the subject and finally came to the conclusion that people of African descent did deserve the pay that was promised to them. And so in 1864, March, Samuel Harrison they then sent a letter saying that Samuel Harrison was eligible to receive his back pay, and then consequently, all the soldiers were eligible to receive their back pay.
And the reference to Frederick Douglass, Reverend Harrison was a part of a relief association before he went enlisted with the 54th, which they collected supplies and food for people in South Carolina who were misplaced. And Frederick Douglass was the national chairman of that organization. And so he knew Douglass because of all of the conferences that he had kind of gone through. And it was Douglass who really impressed on Harrison, because Harrison first was a recruiter. He recruited a lot of the same young men from Berkshire County to enlist for the 54th. And so when Governor Andrew asked him to become the chaplain, he said he really couldn't say no because he had encouraged so many young men, to enlist. How could he say no?
I just wanted to ask, isn't it that two of Frederick Douglass's sons were in regiments, 54th, but in regiment there was A and B?
Yes.
So Samuel Harrison knew that Frederick Douglass's
Sons.
two sons.
Yes, he did.
I would just like to make a comment, and thank you for the accolades for the Sheffield Historical Society, because I'm reflecting and listening to all of you today, pulling things together for us. I'm reminded that Jim Miller met with Patricia, I don't know how many years ago, probably more than 15 years ago, and really asking the question of what about the Black history of Sheffield, Massachusetts. And From that, Jim has put together a database of over 23,000 connections to Sheffield and our Black history, and that's really how we came to work with Jocelyn. And it also started with a project where Patricia said to us, "Can you help me find the burials of my relatives in unmarked graves in our center cemetery?" And to this day, as we speak, our good colleague in the back there, Jackson, and myself, and Beth, and Jim, and I are working on identifying those folks from Patricia's family, from Crosler's family, and several others in unmarked graves in our center cemetery. And we're well on our way to being able to put up a sign honoring those folks and their burials and their birth dates and their death dates, which is otherwise unknown right now. And it's really a tribute to Patricia for getting us off the dime, so to speak, and really digging into that. And it's been, you praise us for that work, but I will tell you, it comes back 10 times to us in the society. It is such a joy and pleasure for all of us in the society to be able to work, because our research at times is, can be dry and somewhat mundane, but when it's people that we know who come and value the work that we're doing, and that story spreads throughout the families, it's a love that's there. I think you mentioned that earlier. It's a love that's there.
Well, I think it's a love that keeps on giving, because Paul and Jim, I think that you guys are, you are the example, can be the example for other historical societies in the county of the kind of work that you're doing and the kind of work that they should be doing as well. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good evening.
So don't leave, because Kathy Staropoli, would you like to tell us what we have waiting out back for us?
Yes, I'd really love for all of you to join us in the back room. I don't know if that room has a name, but you go